Good morning. This is Monday, June the 15th, 2015. Reading from My Utmost for His Highest. Get a move on. 2 Peter 1:5. And besides this, add. And beside this, add. In the matter of drudgery. You have inherited the divine nature, says Peter in verse 4. Now, screw your attention down and form habits. Give diligence. Concentrate. Add means all that character means. No man is born either naturally or supernaturally with character. He has to make character. Nor are we born with habits. We have to form habits on the basis of the new life God has put into us. We're not meant to be illuminated versions, but the common stuff of ordinary life, exhibiting the marvel of the grace of God. Drudgery is the touchstone of character. The great hindrance in spiritual life is that we will look for big things to do. Jesus took a towel and began to wash the disciples' feet. There are times when there is no illumination and no thrill, but just the daily round, the common task. Routine is God's way of saving us between our times of inspiration. Do not expect God always to give you His thrilling minutes, but learn to live in the domain of drudgery by the power of God. It is the adding that is difficult. We say we do not expect God to carry us to heaven on flowery beds of ease, and yet we act as if we did. The tiniest detail in which I obey has all the omnipotent power of the grace of God behind it. I like that. The tiniest detail in which I obey has all the omnipotent power of the grace of God behind it. If I do my duty, not for duty's sake, but because I believe God is engineering my circumstances, then at the very point of my obedience, the whole superb grace of God is mine through the atonement. I'd like to share with you the idea of Coram Deo, C-O-R-A-M D-E-O. What does Coram Deo mean? From R.C. Sproul. He says, I remember Mama standing in front of me, her hands poised on her hips, her eyes glaring with hot coals of fire, and saying in stentorian tones, just what is the big idea, young man? Instinctively, I knew my mother was not asking me an abstract question about theory. Her question was not a question at all. It was a thinly veiled accusation. Her words were easily translated to mean, why are you doing what you are doing? She was challenging me to justify my behavior with a valid idea. I had none. Recently, a friend asked me in all earnestness the same question. He asked, what's the big idea of the Christian life? He was interested in the overarching, ultimate goal of the Christian life. To answer his question, I fell back on the theologian's prerogative and gave him a Latin term. I said, the big idea of the Christian life is Coram Deo. Coram Deo captures the essence of the Christian life. This phrase literally refers of something that takes place in the presence of, or before the face of God. To live Coram Deo is to live one's entire life in the presence of God, under the authority of God, to the glory of God. Living Coram Deo is to live one's entire life in the presence of God, under the authority of God, to the glory of God. To live in the presence of God is to understand that whatever we are doing and wherever we are doing it, we are acting under the gaze of God. God is omnipresent. There is no place so remote that we can escape his penetrating gaze. To be aware of the presence of God is also to be acutely aware of his sovereignty. The uniform experience of the saints is to recognize that if God is God, then he is indeed sovereign. When Saul was confronted by the refulgent glory of the risen Christ on the road to Damascus, his immediate question was, "Who is it, Lord?" He wasn't sure who was speaking to him, but he knew that whomever it was certainly sovereign over him. Living under the divine sovereignty moves more than a reluctant submission to sheer sovereignty that is motivated out of fear of punishment. It involves recognizing that there is no higher goal than offering honor to God. Our lives are to be living sacrifices, oblations offered in a spirit of adoration and gratitude. To live all of life coram Deo is to live a life of integrity. It is a life of wholeness that finds its unity and coherency in the majesty of God. A fragmented life is a life of disintegration. It is marked by inconsistency, disharmony, confusion, conflict, contradiction, and chaos. The Christian who compartmentalizes his or her life into two sections of the religious and the non-religious has failed to grasp the big idea. The big idea is that all of life is religious, or none of life is religious. To divide life between the religious and the non-religious is itself a sacrilege. This means that if a person fulfills his or her vocation as a steel maker, attorney, or homemaker, coram Deo, then that person is acting every bit as religiously as a soul-winning evangelist who fulfills his vocation. It means that David was as religious when he obeyed God's call to be a shepherd as he was when he was anointed with a special grace of kingship. It means that Jesus was every bit as religious when he worked in his father's carpenter shop as he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Integrity is found where men and women live their lives in a pattern of consistency. It is a pattern that functions the same basic way in church and out of church. It is a life that is open before God. It is a life in which all that is done as to the Lord. It is a life lived by principle, not expediency, by humility before God, not defiance. It is a life lived under the tutelage of conscience that is held captive by the Word of God. Coram Deo, before the face of God. That's the big idea. Next to this idea, our other goals and ambitions become mere trifles. My prayer today is that we live before the face of God, that the things that we might see as drudgery as the day wears on is that we live that and do that for the grace of God, to his glory and to our benefit. Let us never forget Jesus Christ crucified and resurrected, and that he has a cross for us today. It's not about us, it's about him. It's about us being obedient. It's about us leaving behind the whine, the complaining, "Oh dear Lord, why me? Why not me, Lord? You brought me to this place, you will bring me through it." Words of this hymn are from Elizabeth C. Clefane, 1868. These lines express the experiences, the hopes, and the longings of a young Christian lately released, written on the very edge of life with the better land fully in view They seem to us footsteps printed on the sands of time, where these sands touch the ocean of eternity. These footprints of one whom God, the Good Shepherd, led through the wilderness into rest, may with God's blessing contribute to comfort and direct succeeding pilgrims. Beneath the cross of Jesus, I fain would take my stand. The shadow of the mighty rock within a weary land, a home within the wilderness, a rest upon the way, from the burning of the noontide heat and the burden of the day. O safe and happy shelter, O refuge tried and sweet, O trysting place where heaven's love and heaven's justice meet, as to the holy patriarch that wondrous dream was given, so seems my Saviour's cross to me, a ladder up to heaven. There lies beneath its shadow, but on the further side, the darkness of an awful grave that gapes both deep and wide, and there between us stands the cross, two arms outstretched to save, a watchman set to guard the way from the eternal grave. Upon that cross of Jesus mine eyes at times can see the very dying form of one who suffered there for me. And from my stricken heart with tears two wonders I confess, the wonders of redeeming love and my unworthiness. I take, O cross, thy shadow from my abiding place. I ask no other sunshine than the sunshine of his face, content to let the world go by, to know no gain or loss, my sinful self, my only shame, my glory, all the cross. I pray that we discover what it means to live Coram Deo. Coram Deo. Blessings.